Hello, welcome to our lesson on histograms. Now a histogram is a graph that breaks a range of values of a variable into classes and displays only the count or percent of the observations that fall in each class. These classes should always have an equal width. Now is this a bar graph or a histogram? Now there's a few differences here. One thing that you can see is that here we have quantitative variables, not categorical variables. And this is also a continuous variable. So there's no gaps in the, the values. And I said that the y-axis can either be counts, or sometimes they use the word frequency, or it can also be percentages. So here are the main things. Histograms are for quantitative, bar charts are for categorical. Bar charts have spaces, histograms do not. Now, some drawbacks of histograms is they're slower to construct by hand, and they don't actually show you the values. So they tell you what bin the values are in, but they don't actually tell you the values. So you can't look at a histogram and find the mean. Sometimes you can typically look at it and find the median, but you can't find the mean just from looking at the data set. Uh, so we use histograms with large data sets and stem plots, dot plots, things like that for smaller sets of data. Here is the president's ages in order of their presidency. So starting at 57, going all the way here to 54. Now let's see if we can create a histogram. Now the first thing I would do is I would take all those values and plug them into my calculator in L1. So I'll give you a second, pause the video, and put all your values in L1. All right, hopefully you're done. Now, to create a histogram, there's a few ways to do it. One way is to put these in ascending order. So if I go over to operations, so second stat, go to operations, sort ascending, I'm going to sort my L1. And now if we look back at our list, you can see it goes from 42 and it works its way up through higher numbers. So we'll go from 42 all the way to the top, which is going to be in its high 60s. So what we can do is pick a bin width. So let's pick a bin width of 5. So what we can do is say first we're going to take all the things from 45 to 50. Then we're going to look at all the values from 50 to 55 and keep working this up until we get 65 to 70. So this, we'd say our bin width is 5. So, and we forgot one previous. That's 40 to 45. All right, and now we want a frequency. So our frequency, what we want to do is we want to add up how many people are between 40 and 45. So I look at my list. Between 40 and 45, it looks like there are 2. So I'm going to go here and type in 2. Between 45 and 50, I'm going to come up here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I'm going to type in 6 and enter. And now if I fill in the rest of these, I'll have my frequency values. So now what I do is I make a histogram off of this data. Remember, the very first thing when you make a graph is you make an axis. Now in this one, we're going to have a y-axis that can either be frequency or percentage. Let's do frequency right now. I'll make this smaller so that makes sense. Now we want to scale things appropriately. We're going by fives, starting between 40 and 45. Now there's two ways to do it. You could just mark the ends 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, and so on. Or you could find the middle of this. So sometimes people mark the middle of the histogram, and so they would mark, you'd add these and subtract, add these and divide by 2, so 42.5, 47.5, 52.5, and so on. Both of them are acceptable ways. Let's go up by fives, saying 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, and 70. And make sure these are as equally spaced as what would be reasonable. And so 45, 50. And now once we have this, now we just graph as high as we can. And we make a rectangle. So between 45, 40, and 45, there's 2. Well, I see that we don't have a scale here. Let's scale this up by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Now we've got to label that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Now you don't always have to label each and every data point, just enough to make the reader understand what the scale is. All right, so now that we have something that looks like this, now we can draw the chart. So 2 comes out here and up. This next one is 6. The next value is 13. Next value is 13. Then we have 7, which would be about here. And our final one is 3. And now we have to, of course, label it. President's ages. And now we have a nice looking histogram of this datum. Now, if we want to do this on our calculator, what we have to do is take a look, put all this into L1 and hit second stat plot. Once we go and click on the first one, we have to turn it on and we have to hit to the right until we get to the histogram. And now once we have that, we can hit zoom 9, which is zoom stat, and then we have something like that. All right, I had a small glitch and I just did it again and I saw it had a data point. Now, if you look at this, you'll see that this graph isn't exactly the same as the graph that we had. So you'll have to hit window, and we started ours at 40 and we went up to 70 and we went up by increments of 5. So that's what we'll need to change. And when we do that, then we'll get a graph that looks very similar to the graph that we had. Now, if you want to see the amount in each bin, you can hit the bin, and it'll tell you the frequency in each bin. So you can just hit to the right, and it can go through. And if you do this on your calculator first, it's sometimes easier to transfer to the paper. All right. Now choosing the right bin size, you don't want too many bins because then you can't see the distribution of the data, but you don't want too few bins, so it's just a bunch of blocks. So it's kind of an art of playing around with it and seeing which one looks best for that data set. All right, now here's a data set for you to try on your own.